So in the previous recording, we talked about cardiac output, and we said cardiac output is equal to stroke volume times heart rate. Now let's talk about ejection fraction. What is ejection fraction? Well, let's take a look. Let's say this is your heart, and again, this is your aorta, and this heart, let's say, is going to get filled by 100, let's say 110 to 130 ml of the blood. That is called your preload, or it's called end diastolic volume. Every time this heart beats, we said it's going to send out, let's say, around 70 to 75 ml. That's called a stroke volume. So what percentage of this blood is being pumped out? Well, this percentage is called ejection fraction. Ejection fraction is equal to a stroke volume divided by end diastolic volume, this one, times 100. So in this case, let's say we have around 70 divided by, let's say, 110. It's around, what, 63% or something like that. So therefore we say ejection fraction is the fraction that shows how many percent of the blood you're pumping out. Instead of how much you're pumping out, it shows the percentage. So normally it's around 55 to 60%. If the ejection fraction goes above this one, that shows you that your heart is pumping much stronger. Because if your heart is going to pump much stronger, in every beat, you're going to pump out more blood and ejection fraction is going to go up. However, you also have to understand, when you pump more blood out, that means more blood is going to come back to the heart, and that's called venous return. And as a result, your preload is going to go up, and as a result, ultimately, your ejection fraction is going to stay constant. What I mean by that is this. If this is your heart again, if this heart is going to pump blood out, this blood is going to come back again to the right side of the heart. It's going to fill this area, right? And by filling this area, that means more blood is going to come in. That means more blood is going to go to lung. And from lung, more blood is going to come back to the left side of the heart. So the point here is this. If I pump more blood out, that means more blood is going to come in. That means more blood is going to come to the right side of the heart. More blood is going to go to lung. More blood is going to come to the left side. That means my preload is going to go up. And when my preload goes up, that means now my end diastolic volume is up. So in ejection fraction, remember, is equal to a stroke volume divided by end diastolic volume. If my stroke volume goes up, then my end diastolic volume is going to go up, and my ejection fraction is going to stay constant. So at the beginning, yes, my stroke volume is going to go up, my ejection fraction is going to go up. But after a few beats, my end diastolic volume also is going to go up, and my ejection fraction is going to go back to the normal level. That's why in your notes, as you can see here, it says, by increasing end diastolic volume, or preload, more blood is pumped out. As a result, my ejection fraction is going to stay relatively constant. And that is going to bring us to the Frank-Starling law. These are the two physiologists that they came up with this idea. And the idea was this. Let's go back to our diagram again. Here's the heart. The more blood you have inside the left ventricle, this is called, again, preload, or it's called end diastolic volume. The more blood you have here, the more you're going to stretch your ventricle, and as a result, we said, the more you stretch, the more you're going to get close to the length of optimum, where the actin and myosin, they're going to overlap optimally, and as a result, now your heart is going to pump more blood out. That means if the preload goes up, my stroke volume is going to go up, and therefore my cardiac output is going to go up. But where this preload is coming from? This preload is coming from blood that returns to the right atrium. This blood that returns to the right atrium is called venous return. So when the venous return goes up, more blood is going to come to the right atrium, more blood is going to come to the right ventricle, more blood is going to go to the lung, and from lung, more blood is going to come back to the left atrium. As a result, more blood is going to come to the left ventricle. What I'm trying to tell you is this one. If the venous return goes up, ultimately your preload is going to go up. And if your preload goes up, your stroke volume is going to go up and your cardiac output is going to go up. Your venous return and your cardiac output must be correlated. In other words, when venous return goes up, your cardiac output is going to go up. That's the fundamental idea of Frank-Starling law. The idea is this: the amount of blood that comes inside the heart, inside the right atrium, should be the same as blood that leaves the left ventricle. In other words, my venous return should be equal to cardiac output. Otherwise, if I bring more blood inside the heart, but I don't pump the same amount of blood out, I'm going to accumulate more blood inside the heart. Now think about it. Let's say I'm going to bring blood here, let's say 100 ml, I'm just making up. So this 100 ml is going to come to the right ventricle, and then it's going to go to the lung. Here's the lung, and blood is going to come back to the lung again, 100. It's going to come here is 100, and now if the left ventricle pump the blood inside the aorta only 90 ml, then they're going to have 10 extra ml here. As a result, every time your heart is going through a cycle, adding 10 ml and 10 ml and 10 ml, as a result, your heart is going to get congested. That is called congestion heart failure. In a normal person, the amount of blood that comes in should be equal to the amount of blood that leaves the heart. In other words, venous return should be equal to cardiac output. Remember this diagram? This diagram shows the cardiac output on the vertical line, on the y-axis, and shows end diastolic volume on the right axis. Can I replace end diastolic volume by right atrial pressure? Sure, because the amount of blood that I have in the left ventricle should be equal to the amount of blood that comes to the right atrium. So therefore, I can replace end diastolic volume of the left ventricle with right atrial pressure. So in other words, what you saw before was really referring to Frank-Starling law. So let me repeat one more time very quickly. Frank-Starling law tells you that the more you stretch your heart, the more blood you have inside the left ventricle, the more blood you're going to push out. As you can see in this picture, the more you go towards right on this x-axis, the more blood you have, the more stroke volume you're going to have. Remember, this green line shows how strong your heart can beat in any given length, and that is because of exercising. Your muscle is going to get stronger just like any other muscle. And this one shows when your muscle is going to get weaker. When your muscle of the heart gets weak, you're going to, of course, push out less. You're done with Frank-Starling law. Now let's go back to what we discussed in the past. I hope you remember your cardiac cycle. Very quickly, we said we're going to start from the time that all four valves are closed. Blood is going to come to the right atrium. When the pressure inside the right atrium exceeds the pressure inside the right ventricle, we said the valve is going to open and blood is going to come inside the right ventricle. Then we said the ventricle is going to go to contraction, and that is going to close the valve, just like this one. And when the pressure inside the ventricle continues to increase and exceed the pressure inside the vessels, inside the aorta or pulmonary artery, then my valve here is going to open, just like this. We said during the time that blood is inside the ventricle, but blood has nowhere to go, that's called isovolumic contraction. After blood is going to get pushed inside the vessels, just like this, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to drop and blood wants to come back. And that is going to make this valve to close again. Now we have some blood inside the ventricle, and now ventricle is going to go to relaxation. This phase is called isovolumic relaxation. And as you can see, the cycle is going to continue. So if you remember this one, then you can understand this diagram much easier. Let's follow me through and see if you can understand it. Here it shows the volume inside the left ventricle. This one shows the pressure inside the left ventricle. This curve is dealing with pressure and volume in the left ventricle. Let's start from the time that your ventricle is filling with blood. Your ventricle is accepting blood from the atrium. So from atrium, blood is going to come inside the ventricle. When the blood is coming from the atrium to ventricle, ventricle is relaxing, so it's expanding. So blood is going to come in, but because the ventricle is expanding, the pressure inside the ventricle is not going to go that much up. Imagine if the ventricle is going to stay in the same size and you put blood inside, then the pressure inside the ventricle is going to go up. But since ventricle also is relaxing and expanding, you put the blood in, but the pressure is not going to go high that much. Therefore, as you can see from here, the ventricle is filling with blood. Of course, in the left side we are dealing with. Ventricle is going to fill with the blood, but the pressure is not going up. Pressure is almost the same. As you can see, the slope of this curve is very blunted. So, let's say we have 70 ml blood inside the heart from previous beat. And now blood is going to come inside the ventricle and increase from 70 all the way to 140. Now inside my heart I have 140 ml. I'm talking about, of course, the left side of the heart. At this moment, my ventricle is going to go to contraction. So here's ventricle is going to go to contraction. The pressure inside the ventricle is going to go up. The pressure inside the ventricle is going to go up and up until this is going to open. So as a result, my valve is going to open. And now blood is going to get inside the ventricle. During this time, the pressure inside the ventricle is going up and blood has nowhere to go. What are you going to call it? As you can see here, between 1 to 2, the volume is not changing. Volume is still 140, but pressure is going up. That is called isovolumic, same volume, contraction. The pressure is going up, but the volume is the same. So it's called isovolumic contraction. At point 2, all of a sudden the valve opens and blood is going to get out. As a result, blood is going to get inside the aorta. Still the ventricle is under contraction, so still the pressure is going up, but the volume is decreasing. Do you see that? So volume is decreasing because you're losing blood from the ventricle, but the pressure still is going up because ventricle is still under contraction. At point 3, the pressure in the ventricle is going to drop, and now blood wants to come back from the aorta back to inside the left ventricle, just like this. Here's my aorta. The ventricle pushes blood in, and now the pressure inside the ventricle is coming down because ventricle starts relaxing. Now blood wants to come back. When the blood wants to come back, it's going to hit this valve, it's going to close it. Now at point 3, the aortic valve is going to close because blood trying to come back. When the aortic valve closes, ventricle still is relaxing. As a result, pressure is dropping dramatically. Blood inside the ventricle is going to stay the same. As a result, from 3 to 4 is called isovolumic relaxation. So let me do this one more time. At point 4, we are filling the ventricle with blood. All 4 valves are closed. Ventricle is filling with blood, and the volume inside the ventricle is going to go up. We are dealing with left ventricle, so volume is going to go up. Pressure is not changing that much. Why? Because as blood is coming inside the ventricle and filling this left ventricle, still my ventricle is relaxing. So therefore, it's going to accommodate for this blood. So blood is not going to increase the pressure until we get to the point 1. At this point, my ventricle starts contracting. As soon as ventricle starts contracting, the mitral valve is going to close. So blood cannot go back inside the atrium. So here, blood is inside the ventricle. The pressure inside the ventricle is rising, but blood has nowhere to go. That's why we call it isovolumic, because as you can see, the volume didn't change. It still is 140. Contraction, because pressure is going up. So at point 1, mitral valve close, and between 1 to 2, we call it isovolumic contraction. At point 2, aortic valves open, and blood is going to leave the left ventricle inside the aorta. Still, the ventricle is under contraction. As a result, the pressure is going up, but the volume is decreasing. As you can see, it's going down. Between 2 to 3 is time that blood is leaving the ventricle. At point 3, the pressure inside the ventricle starts going down. As a result, blood wants to come back inside the left ventricle. And at this point, the aortic valve is going to close again. So at point 3, aortic valve is going to close. At point 2, aortic valve opens. Between 2 and 3 is called ejection phase. Now, at point 3, the ventricle is relaxing, all 4 valves are closed, and as a result, blood inside the ventricle has nowhere to go. It's called isovolumic relaxation between 3 to 4. When the pressure inside the ventricle drops very low, now the pressure inside the atrium increases. As a result, the valve is going to open. The bicuspid valve or mitral valve is going to open, and blood is going to come inside the left ventricle. So at point 4, we say mitral valves open, and blood is going to come inside the ventricle, and the cycle continues. I'm sure now you can figure out this one yourself. This purple one is a normal pressure volume loop. As you can see, when the left ventricle volume increase or preload increase, is going to create the green one. This one, as you can see, preload didn't change. But the amount of force that you apply inside the left ventricle is going up. In other words, your left ventricle is going to put pressure more and more and more before you open the aortic valve. Why you have to put too much pressure before you open aortic valve? Why you have to put too much pressure against this ventricle before this valve opens? Well, maybe because the pressure inside the aorta is very high. If you have a hypertension, then your ventricle should push even harder to open this valve, because remember, you open this valve when the pressure here exceeds the pressure here. If you have a hypertension, then you have to put more pressure. If the pressure inside the aorta is 100, you need only to increase pressure above 100 to open this valve. But if the pressure inside the aorta is 140 or 150, then you have to create 140 or 150 pressure before you can open this aortic valve. So my point is this: if you see that the length between 1 to 2 is increasing, is going higher, that means the pressure inside the aorta must be pretty high. That ventricle must work harder to open the aortic valve. As a result, that one shows increased afterload. And finally, if you see that the curve is moving more toward left, that means lots of blood is going out. Do you see that? Between 2 and 3, we said is what? Ejection phase. You can see lots of blood is going out. And by the time that you go through the isovolumic relaxation, you have less blood inside the ventricle. That means your heart can contract so strongly, majority of this blood is going to go out. As a result, you end up with less blood inside the ventricle. That shows improved in contractility. This is the heart of an athletic patient. This is the heart of someone with hypertension. This is the heart of someone that the heart is weak and cannot put enough blood out. As a result, preload keep increasing. Now let's talk about cardiac work or stroke work. What is cardiac work? Cardiac work is the amount of work that your heart is going to do. This amount of work is equal to the pressure inside the aorta times stroke volume. Now think about it. If this is the heart, the amount of work that your heart, when I say again heart, I'm talking about left ventricle. The amount of work that your heart is doing depends on what is the pressure inside the aorta. The higher the pressure, your heart must work harder to push this blood inside the aorta. And it also depends on how much blood is pumping. If I'm pumping 70 ml versus 90 ml, here I'm working less, here I'm working more. So the work that your heart does depends on two things. What is the pressure inside the aorta? The higher the pressure, I have to work harder. And how much blood I'm pumping, stroke volume. If stroke volume goes up, that means I'm working more. If stroke volume goes down, that means I'm working less. Among these two, the most important factor would be pressure inside the aorta. When the pressure inside the aorta goes up or down, the amount of work that you're doing is going to change dramatically. So why this one is important we are talking about? Because when your cardiac work increase, you have to give more oxygen to the heart. So myocardial oxygen consumption depends on how much work your heart is doing. And that oxygen consumption depends mainly on aortic pressure. For instance, when your left ventricle is pushing this blood inside the aorta and your blood pressure is high, you have a hypertension, this ventricle is going to work so hard to push the blood inside the aorta. And your cardiac oxygen consumption is going to go up. But because you have high blood pressure, your heart cannot push that much of blood, your cardiac output is going to go down. So remember, your work is equal to your aortic pressure times your stroke volume or cardiac output. So I'm trying to tell you that in the case of hypertension, although your cardiac output goes down, but your work is going to go up because your pressure inside the aorta was high. On the other hand, if you're an athlete and you're exercising, your stroke volume and cardiac output is going to go up. You're putting more blood inside the aorta, but your work is not going to increase that much. Yes, it's going to increase, but not as much. So therefore, your cardiac oxygen consumption is not going to go as high as you expect. So we just mentioned that, let's say again, back to our diagram, this is the heart. We just mentioned that if the patient has a high blood pressure, hypertension, then this ventricle is going to work very hard to pump this blood inside the aorta, and your cardiac output is going to go down. You cannot pump that much of blood because pressure is here is very high. What we have to do to make sure my cardiac output is going to go back up and reach the normal amount? Because remember, cardiac output is the one that gives oxygen to my organs. Well, the answer is I have to make my muscle thicker in the left side, and thicker muscle is going to create more force. As a result, it's going to push out. So my cardiac hypertrophy, when my muscle is going to get thicker and thicker, compensates for this high blood pressure. So if someone has a high blood pressure, you expect that the left ventricle is going to become much thicker to push this blood out. That is going to bring us to a very important point, and that is called law of Laplace. This person came up with this idea, which is really, really important. We're going to talk about law of Laplace in the respiratory system also. But for now, I want you to understand the amount of pressure that your heart, in this case, can create depends on the thickness of the muscle of the heart, H, depends on the tension, and also inversely related to radius. I'm not going to go to detail of this one yet because we're going to go through this one in the respiratory system, but for now I want you to focus on the thickness. As you can see, when the thickness goes up, the pressure is going to go up. In other words, when my left ventricle becomes thick, it's going to create more pressure, and as a result, it's going to increase the amount of cardiac output. Is it good? Not necessarily, because again, if you increase the work, you're going to increase the amount of oxygen you use. So if someone's heart has ischemia, then as a result cannot give enough oxygen to the heart, and as a result, heart may go to infarction. So the point here is this, without going to any clinic or any pathology, I want you to understand that if the pressure inside the aorta goes up, then your heart must compensate to increase the pressure inside the left ventricle to be able to keep up with this high pressure. To be able to push this blood inside the aorta, my left ventricle must go to hypertrophy, must get thicker, because based on law of Laplace, if the thickness goes up, H, the pressure is going to also go up, and as a result, your heart is going to create more pressure to push this blood inside the aorta.